Welcome to the Thyroid Life podcast with me, Dr. Rebecca Warren. I'm so excited for you to join me on this journey. This podcast is for you if you're wanting to know how to heal and best support your body after thyroidectomy or after being diagnosed with a thyroid dysfunction. I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, had my thyroid removed, high-dose radiation, and my gallbladder removed, all by the time I was 20. By the time I was 21, I had health issues, struggling with depression, anxiety, brain fog, weight loss resistant, and it wasn't until I drew a line in the sand and decided to take my health back did things start to change. I spent the last decade and a half implementing protocols and healing strategies to reclaim my health and take it to the next level. On this podcast, I'll be sharing the most up-to-date studies, biohacks, and protocols, my own personal journey and recommendations on this healing path. I'll be bringing in experts in different fields of health to help you understand what you need to know to take back your health, as well as sharing my own clinical experience and coaching others that have been on this same journey. My hope is that when you listen to this podcast, you have the knowledge you need to get started and you feel empowered to take your health to the next level. Welcome to the Thyroid Life podcast with Dr. Rebecca Warren, aka the Thyroid Doc. I have been wanting to do and launch this podcast for years, and I'm so excited that it's live and that you're listening to it right now. You know, the first time I decided that I wanted to do the Thyroid Life podcast, it was when it dawned on me. After spending years coaching women and men through thyroid disorders and through healing after thyroidectomy, I realized a few different things. Number one, after a long day of seeing people, a long day of seeing consults and appointments, what I realized that each person that sat across from me came to see me because they were struggling with meeting one of their health goals. But their stories always were the same. It was the same type of doctor's visit to labs, to prescriptions, to not feeling like themselves, to trying different diets, to trying different things. But the crazy thing is that when someone would sit across from me, they would feel very alone on that journey. And then I would go to my next consult after that one, and it was the same loneliness and trying to find answers for themselves and feeling like they know it's not all in their head, that they know that they can get better, that they know that there's something more. And over again, I would hear those stories, and I thought to myself, we're not alone in this journey, and knowing that number one, something is wrong, and number two, wanting something more. And the next thing I realized was that, okay, I'm a doctor. I have all of this clinical experience. I have spent a decade and a half looking at the research, but I was there too before I became a doctor. I experienced those same questions, those same frustrations, those same struggles. And now I'm sitting across from people that are experiencing that too. I realize, you know what? It's time to create a place where not that you just come to because you have a problem with your thyroid or because you had your thyroid removed. A place that you can come to because you want to get better, because you want to hear about all the ways that you can improve your health, because you're ready to take responsibility for your health, because you're ready to be a part of a community that wants to do the same thing and to be led by a doctor that, again, not only helps people get down to the cause to correct the imbalances inside of their body, but from a doctor that's been there too. And so this first episode, I wanted to introduce myself. I wanted to share my own story of how I ended up here doing what I do. Now, my story is going to involve thyroid cancer and radiation, hormone imbalances, and how I finally decided to become a doctor. And I know out there that everyone has a different experience. There's some people that go out and they have their thyroid removed, they get on thyroid medication and stay on it, and they're fine with that. And that's okay. Your experience is your experience. But my experience is what I'm going to share. And my experience dealt with a lot of hopelessness, a lot of feeling loss, of frustration, of feeling like I wasn't in control of my body, and not knowing that I could do anything to affect the outcome of cancer and heart disease and diabetes down the road. And so when I was 16 years old, let's go ahead and jump in, all right? So when I was 16 years old, I remember walking out of a movie theater. And as we were outside a movie theater, I had this unbelievable, horrible pain. in my chest. I remember falling to the ground in a fetal position, holding my chest, thinking, oh my, is this a heart attack? Like, I remember all it was going through my head is heart attack, heart attack, heart attack. And I was there with a family friend, and they were talking about calling an ambulance. But up until that point, I had never really needed an ambulance. I had never gone to the emergency room or gone to the hospital and had a hospital stay. So it just scared the crap out of me. And I kept saying, no, no, even though I was laying there in a fetal position, I didn't know. I was just so scared. And so the family friend, someone stayed with me. She came up with a car. We weren't that far away from the hospital. We got in the car. We go to the hospital, and I get hooked up to morphine because of how severe the pain is. Now, my hospital stay is kind of a blur, right? Because I'm on pain meds. I mean, worst pain I'd ever felt. And at one point, I do remember waking up, and my parents had made it. They were upset. And the doctor explaining to my parents that they did some testing and they found out that I had thousands of stones in my gallbladder. And I remember laying there thinking, what? First of all, what's a gallbladder? But second of all, like, how? I have felt fine. But, at that point, with a gallbladder issue, what's the answer every single time? Well, it's okay because we can get the gallbladder cut out. And so that's what we did. We went in for surgery. I had my gallbladder taken out. And I remember going home and recovering in a dark room for 2 weeks. But I specifically remember recovering from the drug withdrawals, from the pain meds I felt like I needed at such a young age, then from the surgery itself. But at 16, I started thinking in my head, like, well, how does this happen? I didn't have any education about the body. Heck, I didn't know what a gallbladder was until that happened. But something in me began to question that. I get that I felt fine, but obviously I wasn't fine. Obviously something is wrong. Not just the gallbladder, something's wrong with me. I should do something about it. And I remember going into my doctor's office and having he was just checking out my scars, seeing how I was doing. And I let the whole appointment go. And then at the end I said, I feel like maybe I need to change something with my lifestyle. Like, I feel like I should lose some weight because I'm 16. I don't have the knowledge. I don't have the education. And of course, to me, weight loss and health means the same thing. So I was determined to lose some weight. And the doctor said, oh, yes, I got that. So, he's finishing up his paperwork, finishing up his questioning, went outside the room, came back in with a Xerox copy of the food pyramid and said, all right, just follow this. And I remember sitting there, and I can vividly remember that paper. It was that triangle and then a paragraph or two at the bottom about what to do. And then I thought, okay, well, if he's not worried about the fact that at 16 I had this organ removed, then maybe I shouldn't be worried either. So I went home and I did the same things that I'd always done. And then at 19, I was visiting my parents back from my first semester in college, and I was driving and I was looking over my shoulder, and my mom noticed this lump in my neck. And I remember her saying, like, what's going on? Like, what's that lump? And I never noticed it. Again, I felt fine. And she, of course, being a mom and how all moms can be, she was like, you're going to go get that checked out. You're going to go get that taken care of. You're going to do something about that. That's not normal. And I remember going back to college and going to the clinic there. They checked me out. They looked at my neck. They looked in my mouth, and they said I had strep. Again, I said, okay, well, I don't feel bad, but I guess that makes sense. And I told my mom, and she said, absolutely not. You're coming home. We're going to take you to my doctor. So I come home during break, and we start doing all these tests. And listen, guys, I've got to be honest with you. I was 19 when I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And I know this can be very common, my experience, what I'm about to share with you guys. But up until maybe 8 years ago, so I've been on this journey for 15 years personally, maybe 8 years ago, up until then, I didn't want to think about this time in my life. I cried during this time in my life. And honestly, I tried to kind of block it out. So the truth is, most of what happened and how it happened was such a blur because After all the tests were done, after everything that they did, I remember sitting in my doctor's office in that room, beige colored walls. Listen, I don't remember all the details, but there's scenes that stick out in my mind that will stay with me for the rest of my life. And I remember sitting there, the doctor coming in, and they did the needle biopsy and all of this. And he said, I'm sorry, but your daughter has thyroid cancer. We think she has thyroid cancer. But, the good news is that if there's any cancer to have, this is the good one. And if you've been diagnosed with thyroid cancer and if you've had your thyroid removed, you more than likely have heard this statement. Because 10 years ago, I thought I was the only one that heard such a ridiculous, idiotic statement come out of a doctor's mouth after hearing that you have thyroid cancer. And I remember thinking, first of all, what? Like, what? First of all, why would you even say that? Like, there is no good cancer. There is no good cancer. I didn't know why then I felt that way, but now I know why I feel that way. Because regardless of how easy doctors think the cancer or the tumor is to work with or to get rid of, it's all a red flag that the body is not well. The second thing that went through my head was, how? I walked in here and I felt fine. The same exact stinking thing that happened when I had my gallbladder attack. How is it that I can go every day, feel fine when there's disease inside of my body? After the doctor said that about this being the good cancer to have, don't remember anything else, but I do remember my mom sitting in the corner crying and me feeling like I had this out-of-body experience, like I was floating to the top of the room, watching me and the doctor, my mom, all of that happen, like as if I was watching a movie. So what ended up happening was the doctor said, of course, this is a good cancer to have because we can cut out this vital organ and put your daughter on a medication for the rest of her life, because a pill can always, always compete with a vital, living, adaptive organ. I don't know if you can tell, but that was sarcasm there. But that's what happened, right? Like that's what happens is that we look at these body parts and we think that since they're so messed up, we can do better. Now, I scheduled it during Christmas break. I had my thyroid removed and then I had moderate to high dose radiation on all the paperwork, 100 MCIs of radioactive iodine. Day of, I got 99, which is really interesting because once you reach 100 or above, now we're looking at a higher chance of developing secondary cancers like leukemia. I would hope that the reason they gave me 99 wasn't to get me out of that range, because 99 or 100, it's still a high dose of radiation. Now, I remember when I had to stay at the hospital for my radiation, I remember how hard it was because I had to stay 48 hours in solitary confinement, as it felt like to me. I couldn't be around anyone. I couldn't touch anyone. I had to stay in this hospital room where everything was covered in plastic. The floor was covered in plastic. The phone was covered in plastic. The bed, everything was covered in plastic. Why? Because I was about to take this radioactive pill that was going to have radiation oozing out of all of my pores. So I couldn't be around anyone. And I remember when the nurse brought it to me to my room, I remember I was in a hospital gown and she was in this like modified hazmat suit, and it was a silver tray with a silver or metal. I don't know if it's silver, but it was a metal tray, a metal container. She opened it, I had to take it, and I had to drink it. And I remember how vulnerable and weak I felt for a few different reasons in that moment. Number one, I was alone. I was going through something which, again, I didn't fully understand, scared crapless. But then I see this nurse who's completely protected, and here I am unprotected, about to put this radioactive thing inside of my body. And I spent those 2 days just thinking about how I got there, just thinking about what this meant about my future. Like, how can I have a gallbladder removal and a thyroid removal all before my 21st birthday? If this is how bad my body is now, what does that mean about where I'm going to be in 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now? And after all that was said and done, I was sent on my way. I was given my Synthroid medication. They told me not to, touch people for a week as I went back to college. And that was it. And even though I had all these questions and even though I didn't fully understand, I went back to living my life with all of this uneasiness, a little bit of hopelessness buried deep down, but a lot of trying to forget that. So I would be lying if I didn't say that first year, I thought after my thyroidectomy, I thought, okay, maybe this is what I needed. I lost all this weight. I was on Synthroid. I went back to just trying to live my life as normal as possible. Again, not fully understanding what that butterfly organ did for me. And then after that year, I started to see some changes. I started to see, okay, now I was gaining some weight. That's interesting. Maybe I need to eat differently. Maybe I need to exercise more. And then all more things started creeping in. So I started gaining weight and then becoming weight loss resistant. I started to feel depressed. Now, let me go ahead and say this because I see signs of depression show up in so many different ways for different people. Yes, there's depression, like feeling suicidal. And of course, if that's you, make sure you get help for that because it can get better, right? But there's also this type of depression where every day you wake up like there's a blanket over you. Like every day you're carrying this dark blanket that you just can't shake. This feeling of downness. I mean, that's the only way I could have explained it then. And then I started struggling with anxiety. And of course, there's so many ways that anxiety can show up, from panic attacks too. For me, it was laying up at night. I would get fixated. I would get stuck on conversations and things that I did or didn't do. I would fixate on problems that I could not fix. I would fixate on problems that I couldn't change, that most of the time had nothing to do with me, but this worry would come over me. And then I started noticing that my cycles weren't regular. Like, okay, I was skipping some cycles. It would be a lot, like shorter. And then it got to a point where I wasn't getting my cycles for a period of time. And I remember thinking, okay, this is not good. I gotta get this figured out. And so what ended up happening is I started going back to my endocrinologist, and talking to him about what I was experiencing. I'm not losing weight. I feel like something is wrong. And so, of course, he would order the thyroid labs to make sure, because I didn't have a thyroid, to make sure that everything looked okay. And according to him, it did. And I was just, how? I feel like this is my thyroid. That has to be it. Well, we can do some other tests. But of course, my CBC, the other stuff came back normal too. Well, let's play around with this other medication. Or, my favorite recommendation was, all right, do you understand calories? Let's eat less calories. That's why you're not losing weight. That's probably why your period is messed up. But I got to a point where I was doing CrossFit exercises and eating vegan and restricting what I was eating so much, because I thought to myself, well, if my doctor, the endocrinologist, who's supposed to be the, expert on what is going on with me, if he says I need to eat less, then I need to eat less. And yet, after doing CrossFit, after restricting and being vegan, I'll never forget, they brought over, they do this testing to see what's your body mass and fat percentage. And it hadn't budged from the last time we had done it. And so I decided, okay, well, then that means I need to restrict more. I need to become raw vegan. And so I did raw veganism, and I worked out, and I committed to working out and committed to eating raw vegan, because obviously it was my fault that I was feeling the way that I was feeling, because there was nothing wrong with me. And I went back to my doctor, did the test, and everything came back okay. Until one day I got into a car accident. And it's interesting how God can work, because in the midst of feeling like crap, I get hit from behind from someone. I don't remember how fast she was going. And I thought I was fine. And a day had went by, and I realized, oh my gosh, like my traps, like my shoulders were burning, and I was like, ugh, I need some pain management. Like I felt burning. I felt like restriction. I couldn't really turn my head. I lost my range of motion. So I called my brother who was in chiropractic school because all I knew about chiropractors is pain. So I asked him, I was like, hey, I want to go to a chiropractor. I'm in pain. I had this car accident. And he said, all right, you need to go to this doctor. It was a further drive for me, right? I had to drive 30 minutes to get there, which for a college student, that's like asking them to drive 2 hours. But I'll never forget, I went through the testing. We got my x-rays done. And when it was time to go over my report of findings, seeing my x-rays, seeing how wrecked I was from the inside out, like my cervical spine was supposed to be a 45-degree curve. It was reversed. It was buckling around C3, C4, C5. But not only that, this doctor spent an hour with me, pouring into me, teaching me that the body was created to heal and that the body does the right thing at the right time. And if at any point we question that, it's because there's underlying issues, whether we feel them or not, whether we have the symptoms yet or not, that those are all red flags, that the body needs help so that it can heal. It was the first time that a doctor stood in front of me and told me that you are responsible for your health, which means that no one's going to care more than you and that you can get yourself better. And that was revolutionary for me because up until that point, I felt like a victim. I felt like all of this happened to me. And the reason why I'm not losing weight is because my body's failing me and I got to make up for my body's failure. And the reason I don't feel well is because my body sucks and I can't do anything about it until my doctor's appointment and until in that doctor's appointment, the doctor tells me that something's wrong. Up until that point, I was sitting around letting life happen to me. That night, I decided I was going to draw a line in the sand, that no doctor would know my health better than me. No doctor. I made a decision that I was going to fire my endocrinologist and I was going to find someone else. I had to find someone else that could give me answers. And so that's when I started digging into the research. Listen, I talk about firing doctors, my coaching clients, the content I've created. I talk about that all the time. And that doesn't come from a place of ego or thinking that I'm better as a, functional doctor than, a medical doctor. Not at all. That comes from a place of desperation of a 20-year-old girl that didn't have any answers. If I had stayed in the same place, I can't even imagine where I would have ended up today. I would have been a shell of myself. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to understand my labs. I might not understand research studies that well, but I'm going to do my best. I'm going to do whatever I need to do. And that's where my journey started in taking back my health. I didn't have this fake, false hope of maybe I can feel better. Maybe, hopefully. No, it was a drive. It was an understanding and one principle that my body was created to heal. Even if I had my thyroid taken out, it means I can always get better. And I did. And the crazy thing is my life was transformed in 90 days. I got on the right dose that I needed to get on. I understood that my digestive system needed support. My nutrition needed to change. I understood that the way I handled stress needed to change. And in those 90 days, I decided instead of becoming an eye doctor, I wanted to become a doctor of chiropractic because I wanted to be able to provide that power, that empowerment to people. I wanted to be able to teach people and to educate people the same way this doctor did for me. Now, a few years ago, I requested all of my records. As I remember talking to a coaching client and she was asking about that. I was like, you know what? Because it's such a blur, I should request those records. I requested those records. And I remember sitting there looking at the doctor's notes. Now, when I changed my health, when I took it into my own hands, anytime I did labs, I had my labs. So first thing is this. When I said, okay, I'm responsible for my health, I grabbed all my labs and I started studying them. And then when I understood how to read labs, and then when I understood that my labs were incomplete, I remember looking at my doctor's signature and the words okay on the labs when they weren't okay, because he wasn't doing the complete labs and they weren't okay. The levels were not optimal for me. But then a few years ago, when I requested all of the records, I saw this story of me getting worse and worse and worse, and the recommendations being the same. I mean, literally getting to the point where, do you feel like you need an antidepressant? Like offering me antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication. But I could see in those paperwork, every single doctor visit, how that connected to my not being on my optimal dosing. Something so simple and important like that was being completely missed, and it was affecting my ability to walk through this world feeling good, to feel well enough to feel like I have hope, like I can commit myself to my studies, like I can commit myself to things that were happening. And the crazy thing is, up until that point, I had struggled in school. I'd struggled in understanding things. I remember during that time, I was doing algebra, and it wasn't, the equations weren't sticking. I had to go to my classes, and I did, like, they had a math lab, and I would do tutoring with the teacher's assistant just to get a B. I mean, I put in hours. And when everything changed, when I was on the right medication, when I was fueling my body the way my body needed it, when I was on the right supplementation, when I was getting adjusted, I was like a new person. I had new passions. I was alive in my classes. I ended up completely acing my classes, going, through all the pre-med classes. I mean, when I was struggling with my hormone issues, I thought I was the dumbest person in the world because I could not get my brain to work. And it scared me because I'm like, how am I going to get to do anything? When I got my thyroid hormones again and my body healing, I could complete all of the classes in my pre-med and do exceptional in it. My life completely changed because I drew a line in the sand. Now, my journey is now 15 years post that. And I want to say it's not easy. It hasn't been easy. But I do know, because of the journey that I've been on, my understanding of health is completely different now. My understanding of health isn't a destination, but something that I commit to do every single day. From the way that I eat, the money I invest in my health, to what I accomplish with my family in regards to detoxifying our home or investing in good water systems, investing in good testing, creating relationships with other practitioners that think and work like I do to work with me. It's not an easy journey. And you might be listening to this because you're thinking about having a thyroidectomy. And I don't want you to think like I saw someone where they said, I just feel like anytime I ask someone about their experience after thyroidectomy, it's always so negative. Like, my story was pretty crappy for a really long time. I mean, it was so crappy that when I first started dating my husband, he asked me about my scar and I started crying. It was a date. We were on our way to dinner. I remember just crying because I felt like such a victim. I was so frustrated with what happened. Listen, I don't want you to think that this is a negative thing. What I want you to understand is that this decision isn't a light one. This is a big decision. And to go into it educated, to go into it knowledgeable, to go into it knowing what you need to do. Because cutting out a thyroid doesn't mean your body's well now. You just cut out a diseased organ, but the diseased organ doesn't just decide to be diseased on its own. A sick body makes sick organ. A sick cells make sick tissues, which make sick organs that make sick organ systems. And I think that's the biggest reason why so many people can suffer after thyroidectomy. There's two, but that's the biggest reason, is because our body still needs help healing. Our body still wants to get better. Even if you were diagnosed with thyroid cancer, even if it was thyroid autoimmunity, even if you were hypo or hyperthyroid, your body still wants to get well. So the biggest problem is that now that we've cut out an organ, and I see this with women who I have coached with hysterectomy, now they cut out their uterus and their ovaries, and now it's this feeling like, okay, well, I got everything taken care of. Shouldn't I be better? Shouldn't it all be fixed? And problems can arise a year after to 10 years after. This is something you have to live with for the rest of your life. So number one is understanding that your body wants to still heal, needs to still heal, and you can absolutely get better and live a life that you're proud of, that you feel energy and balanced in. But the second thing is that the labs, being on the proper hormone dosage, not according to a range, not according to what doctors recommend, that you're in a range that makes you feel well. Thank you guys for tuning in to my story. Now, on my next podcast, I'm going to share, I want to share with you guys, let's dive into the most common asked questions about the lab testing. I want to share what my health journey has looked like for the last 10, 15 years. So this story is focused with everything on at the beginning. But I think there's a lot of similarities within my story and a lot of people that I have helped and a lot of people that might be listening to this right now. And so my hope is always that you find empowerment, hope, that you feel like you're able to, that you understand that you are your best advocate. And I am here. I'm going to be walking every step of the way with you guys. In this podcast, I'm going to be sharing what I'm doing for my own health, what I've done in the past. I'm going to bring on experts in the field of healing and transforming your body. I'm going to share studies with you guys. So excited to be on this Thyroidless Life podcast adventure with you. All right. Hey guys, Dr. Rebecca here, the Thyroidless Doc. So glad you were able to tune into today's podcast episode. If you enjoyed today's episode, I ask that you subscribe to the Thyroidless Life podcast so you can stay up to date on all my new episodes for you. And leave a review. If this was helpful for you, just let me know by leaving that review and tell me where you're from. I love to see who's tuning in and where they're from. You can also connect with me at my website at drrebeccawarren.com, as well as on Facebook and Instagram at Dr. Rebecca Warren, also the Thyroidless Doc. On Facebook, I have a free Healing After Thyroidectomy group. I created this group in hopes of having a community for people to join where they want to get better, where they want to take back their health, they want to reach the health goals that they want to reach, and they can feel encouraged by others that are on the same journey and being led by me. So I hope you find us on Facebook at Healing After Thyroidectomy group. Can't wait for you guys to hear the next episode.